Well, hi. I am here today interviewing Amber Simpson. Amber, I met her in June. I was at the Sustainability Conference at Webster, and I was talking to Lori Diefenbacher about kind of some of the things that I'm interested in, and also the fact that I had just left my position in St. Louis Public Schools, and she said, "You have to go meet this lady." And she had just talked to Amber. And so I went over and introduced myself, and we soon learned that we had very similar visions for a lot of things. And she told me about the Vernari School that she is starting in the fall of 2016. And so since that time, we've been in contact, and I've been working with Amber on some projects to get the Vernari School and Vernari community up and running. So I'm going to switch out of selfie mode and turn this over to Amber. Okay, so your name is?
My name is Amber Simpson.
Okay, and if you would like to give me your approximate age.
Well, approximately old now.
Yeah.
38, almost 39.
Okay, and can you tell me your professional role in advancing global citizenship? So in other words, your current job title,
Sure.
and then what you're working towards.
Absolutely. So currently, I'm at U.S. Bank. I'm a part of the Strategy and Corporate Affairs Division, specifically in the multicultural strategy area. And so when you put that in the context of global citizenship, my day-to-day is to look at how do we, as a corporation, demonstrate not only corporate social responsibility, but also providing an excellent customer experience, particularly for the multicultural community. Now, when we define multicultural on a very broad base, so you have ethnicity, so African American, Asian, Hispanic, etc., but also the LGBT community, persons with disabilities, and then you can even go youth, seniors, women, veterans, etc. So all of that is my world every day.
Wow, that's wonderful. And then how about a little bit more about Vernari and how
Absolutely.
that got started?
So when I think about what really is a key element to any economy, the schools really are key. To me, the K-12 pipeline is really the talent pipeline, it's the social pipeline, it's the social fabric, the economic fabric, everything. And when you think about economies being local, regional, national, and global, schools really are building up those little citizens that are global citizens. Specifically for Vernari, our concept is that we're building scholar citizens, and these scholars, that's obvious in the whole academic piece, but citizens in the sense that they're looking at how do they live up and play their role as being stewards of the environment locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. Our focus on sustainability has that global citizenship piece. Right now, we have the conference, World Conference in Paris going on right now on climate change. These issues around sustainability, around climate change, scarcity, all these types of things are global issues. It's not isolated. And so Vernari Learning, particularly the school, is really going to be designed to orient our kiddos in understanding not just the science behind some of these things, but the social responsibility, the economic implications, the political implications, and all these types of things, and where they fit in either today and tomorrow as the future decision makers, leaders, entrepreneurs, etc., and being stewards of the environment.
Fantastic. Okay, so this is November the 30th, and it is right around 3 o'clock, and we are at Hartford Coffee Company. And so I'm going to just continue to ask you a few more questions. So when did the idea of global citizenship or being a global citizen first come into your vocabulary or enter your thinking?
Wow. Actually, this is something I've been living with for a very long time. Part of it is my academic background. I was as an undergrad, my focus, my major was in French and international business. And so I've been walking that path since, the mid-90s. And this concept of global citizenship has been something that has always resonated with me. I've always thought of myself in that way, but I didn't have the vocabulary, if you will,
Right.
until going to school, and then particularly so, it became even more solidified when I was doing my MBA. I happened to do my MBA at St. Louis University, and it was the Executive Masters in International Business, and it truly is that focus on the global, kind of citizen, how we are so connected on so many different levels, and if you don't realize that, then you really are not with programs, so to speak.
Right.
Because even at the smallest level has, implications on at a macro level globally. And so that has been just kind of my business focus. But as I'm changing that and translating that into how do you do that with a school, it's trying to expose our kiddos to that reality. Our schools have got to prepare our students for citizenship in a different context. Citizenship, yes, where you live, but that's not good enough. And it's much bigger than that. And so to get kids to understand that they are a part of something much bigger, what better way than to do that through school, and then to really orient them in a space where that has those implications globally
Right.
in very real ways. So
Right.
that's what we want to do.
That's great. Was your usage of this term just an accident, or just an eloquent turn of phrase or a metaphor, or did you really mean it?
Really,
I think I already know the answer to that question, but
Yeah.
I'll
You know,
listen.
Really, I think, again, it comes to, it's something that I've always thought about. I've never thought that I'm just in my little space in St. Louis, but it wasn't until, my undergraduate experience did I get the actual terminology, if you will, because that was my formation, if you will, academically in that international business space. So that global citizenship was something that was interwoven there. Why are you in international business? Why is that important? What does that mean? And so I just kind of internalized that. And so I look at that on a lot of different levels. And so even to the point with that, my mantra a lot of times is you think globally, act locally.
Right.
So that, again, is a way that every day anyone can be a global citizen.
That's, yeah. So taking away the term global, what does it mean to you to be a citizen?
So to me, being a citizen means taking ownership and being an active participant. And so this is on several different levels. In one level, there could be the political, activation, if you will. But even beyond that, because let's be honest, a lot of people, for various reasons, are not necessarily very active per se in that specific space. But it's also about taking care of your neighborhood. What are you doing to take care of your property? Are you paying your taxes? Are you following the laws? What are you doing in your space, in your sphere of influence, to make not only your personal space, but every space around you a better place for yourself and everyone else? So that, to me, is citizenship. And so that's where, when you think about this idea of sustainability, the ideas around importance of place, systems thinking, interconnectedness, all of those types of things, global or not, it really is part of citizenship to me.
And I think that you've pretty much already answered this with, your information about your background and how you came to the idea of global citizenship. But what informed your thinking in using global citizenship that didn't necessarily show up in print? And that's kind of an odd question, but I think what I take it to mean is, I guess, you can go online and Google global citizenship, and you'll get, a global citizen is this, this, and this. How do you take it to, I guess, apply to yourself personally?
Well, actually, I have a very tangible kind of path to that. And it came about when I studied abroad. So my senior year as an undergrad, I lived in Paris, France. And for the first time, I was in a different context, and walking down the street, I'll just give an example. So walking down the street, any street, America, person will look at me and think, oh, there's a black woman, and whatever that means for that person, right? When I was in France and I'm walking down the street, the thought was, oh, there's a young woman from Martinique, which I thought was very interesting.
That is interesting.
When I spoke French, because of my accent, they said, oh, you're from England. And for the very first time, in a weird kind of way, I realized that these paradigms and definitions of who you are so fluid.
Right.
And so in a funky kind of way, I guess, and from a social perspective, this concept of global citizenship,
Right.
that you are just
Because it
a
wasn't like when
being.
you're walking down the street in
Yeah.
St. Louis and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, there's a black woman.
Right.
It's
right. It
you're-
was very, very interesting.
you were kind of an enigma.
Yes, yes, it was very interesting. Then another way, I happened to be living abroad when Diana died, and I was actually right there at the bridge just before, a couple days before it happened, and then after it happened, went to the Pont Neuf, and just it was amazing. But it just really solidified how we are so interconnected. Things that happen in one place affect people around the world and vice versa. Because I was a poor student, I didn't have a television, so my access to news was newspaper and radio. And that just gives you a different perspective. When you have to read the newspaper, and that's an art that's kind of dying a bit, particularly for younger generations. But even the format of the news there was very, very different from our format. And so you did hear about all these different things. And you're living in a cosmopolitan place like Paris, which is like a New York, like a Chicago, like an LA, where you have people from all over. And all these pieces affected somebody who was just, maybe next to me on the train or, whatever. I had people at work, and when I was an intern, asking me about what was happening with the Clintons. I mean, just craziness. But it was just so interesting to me how the world, all of a sudden, became this neighborhood.
Right.
It was just instantly, it kind of collapsed.
Because
on itself.
everybody, no matter who you were,
Right.
was interested in what was happening with Diana.
Right,
You didn't
right.
have to be British. You didn't have to be,
And so that's just like one example. And I represented for many people in my circle, what's happening in America.
Right.
They represented what was happening in, Scandinavia or in Russia or wherever they were from. And having these dialogues and talking about our hopes, dreams, concerns, and we'd have deep conversations. The French people really love to have deep conversations, and it just kind of clicked for me in a way, kind of like when you do a foreign language. It's one thing to have the worksheets and to practice in class, but when you go to the country, now all the cultural nuances make sense because you hear it in use. That's kind of the thing with global citizenship. It's something that there's books about it.
Right.
You can have a lecture, you can have class. But when you are in a context that is not really maybe an international context or a context that's different from what your norm is, and you're able to interact with people from other places, and to realize that the issues are the same, the goals and hopes and dreams are all the same, and the challenges, while they may be different in their specific nature, but generally speaking are kind of the same, it kind of hits you, we are global citizens. And so it helped me to really further appreciate that what my obligation, I guess, as a person is to think in that perspective, that it's so much bigger than me. I, in a very interesting way, am interconnected to everybody else, so I need to be my best self, because that's how I can show that I am being a good citizen to the greater community.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you today, because, so many of the ideas that I have, you're actually doing it, like I'm just kind of tagging along on your coattails. Hopefully I'll, be doing it along with you. But, I have the ideas, but I don't necessarily have as much big picture as you have, and, the ability to figure out how to make it happen. So that's why I think it's just so awesome. Let's see. In which community or communities do you consider yourself a citizen?
That's a really interesting question. I think one can answer that with all the different ways you identify, I would say. So I could say I'm in the community of educators. I'm in the community of moms. I'm in the community of minority, female executives. I'm in the community of doctorates. I'm in the community, there's so many different ways. But that's something, it's interesting that you asked that, because it's not necessarily that I think about it until something happens, right? And so when something happens, whatever that something is, then that causes me to then to say, okay, how am I reacting and how am I identifying in this scenario? I'll use an example, Ferguson, and that has been a very interesting question I've been grappling with, like how am I identifying, who am I in this conversation, given that I live right in that area.
Yeah.
And so, but it has global implications, because a dear friend of mine who lives in Beirut called immediately and said, "Are you okay?
Oh
We're
my
hearing about
gosh.
this." I'm like, "You're in Beirut."
Yeah.
You're asking me if I'm okay. And so, again, that's another example
Right.
of this global citizenship. I mean, we are all connected through, the information highway, whether it's the internet, media, it's all its resources. We are all connected. So, go back to answer the question, I guess that's a long way of saying that it just depends on whatever we're talking about, and in some kind of way, shape, form, or fashion, I'm probably a part of that.
Well, and it sounds like to me, what I take from that is that, right now you're sitting here with me, and you and I have common interests when it comes to sustainability and access for children in particular, but adults too, in our local community. But then, if we went to that fellow over there or that guy over there, whatever we would have in common, then
Right.
we would figure out like how our communities interacted.
And that's kind of when we think about global citizen, global world, yes, but global and holistic too.
Right.
It's in all different kind of aspects.
Right.
So whether you're, it's my faith community, or
Right.
it's, my professional community, community activism, all these types of things.
Right.
All these are communities in a holistic sense.
And I think because you brought up Ferguson and where you live, and I probably should turn off the camera before I say this, but I'm not, because I think I told you before when all of that happened, my cousin lives in Calverton Park,
Right.
and her immediate response was to tell people, "Oh, I don't live in that part of Ferguson. We're fine." And I was so offended.
And it's so interesting because I
Right.
too live in Calverton
Yeah.
Park, and
I
we
saw
have
that.
had a very intense debate in our little 8-block
I
neighborhood.
saw that as such a short-sighted
Well,
response.
Well, yeah, but it has been, so prior to Ferguson,
Yeah.
there has been a lot of push and pull in our local government, City Hall, about should we be a part of, annexed into Ferguson, or
Yeah.
maintaining our separation. And that's a whole other interview. But I think from a symbolic kind of how you identify kind of question, like
Right.
what community, people are so quick, I think, to disassociate
Right.
with what's perceived as the negative, the bad, the wrong. And what I thought was such a weird conundrum is Ferguson is not this blighted,
No.
downtrodden community by any means. Are there issues? Sure.
It's a
And-
lot worse
and-
where I live on the south side.
So that's why it was such a surreal kind of experience
Right.
for me. And so I kind of took the opposite. And so when people would talk about it, I would be very quick to say, well, I actually live right there. And you probably have it wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's not, yes, there are issues, no doubt. But it's not like something that just happened yesterday.
Right.
These are things that are embedded just in our region that we as a region need to address.
Right.
But quite frankly, I think that there are areas in our community that are in much more need
Right.
of support, particularly a lot of the financial support,
Right.
things of that nature. So kind of taking us back to global citizenship. Another way of, I guess, a segment of that is collective impact. I think that we need to get really real on what that means. St. Louis is a very generous philanthropic community, but we're very, very actionary, and sometimes to subside our angst or whatever, we feel that we just put money on something in a place and we're good.
Right.
We're done. And clearly that's not it. We need the resources.
Right.
But how do we think holistically, globally, in the sense of looking at all of the municipalities in the county and city together as a region to create real impact and for everybody. So that's another way of looking at global citizenship, that you're not just in your own little piece, but it really does affect everybody.
Yeah. So instead of global citizenship, actually, I skipped one. What other ideas figured into your thinking when you turned to global citizenship?
Some of the things that we talked about already,
Yeah.
right? So, the idea of your opportunity where to be, like being where to live, where to work, is not just in your current zip code,
Right.
or even your own country. Particularly when you have other skill sets such as foreign languages and other skills to take you all over the world. That's a real possibility and opportunity. So that's something I think about. I start thinking about when I think of global citizenship, that I can really go anywhere. Also, actually care about what's happening in other places in the world. That it does matter, and we need to know about it. Particularly, living in this country, which even though we have a lot of problems, we still are the leader globally when it comes to our moral stance, if you will. A lot of ways we're leaders still in the global economy. So it matters. We need to be leaders in setting the standard of citizenship.
Uh-huh.
That's very difficult and nuanced, and it's a lot of stuff happening. But and the politicians, that's a whole other thing. But as a normal person, just everyday Joe Schmo, just be aware of what's happening. Know that there's a whole world out there, and you never know who you might meet and who you can learn from. And so those are kind of things too that I really like to watch news and think programs from other countries or other cultures, just to know what else is out there and how that enriches my life.
Right. Well, and even some of the partnerships that you've made through this process, and learning like what Dimitri is doing, or what Michelle is doing, and finding out how you can plug into that. That's what one of the things I think is so interesting about this project, and I'll ask you a little more about that in a few minutes. But instead of global citizenship, why not use terms such as global awareness or global person or member of the human family? What does global citizenship bring to the table that other terms do not?
Yeah, so citizenship for me implies ownership and action and accountability. Those three pieces. If you're a global person, okay, whatever. But citizen says that you have a responsibility to do something, and you're accountable to others. And so I think that term really is best if what you're trying to take a stand for, or make a stance on, is that all of us are accountable to each other. So yes, it is about the human race. Yes, it is about, being a global person, but it's not about you. It's about others, how you're affecting others. And that, to me, is the trade-off, if you will, the counterbalance or counterpoint of what citizenship really is about. It's not just about the person. You have your rights, but your rights are only extend as far as the next person. So how do you have that interplay? And that's what global citizenship is.
Some people argue that citizenship necessarily must be restrained within state and national borders. How would you respond?
Again, I think that it depends on how you're defining, citizenship. There is that certain level, clearly, of citizenship. However, if you take it on how you interact with other people, how much you're providing support or caring for things outside of where you are from or where you live, it's much bigger than a passport or a driver's license or whatever. because it really does affect everyone. And I know this is a very hot topic now when we think about what's happening with ISIS and all of this. And there's people are saying some very, very unfortunate things about refugees and all this type of stuff. And I, step back, and my husband and I talk about this. I'm like, are you listening to what you're saying? These are people that are fleeing. They just want to have the same thing that you want, to be able to raise their children in a safe place where they don't have to worry about something happening to their baby as they're walking down the street, or they can go to the grocery store, make a good living for themselves. This is why we've got to not hide, I would say, behind these very strict, narrow definitions of citizenship, because I think that is a thinly veiled xenophobia conversation, in my opinion. And that's, to me, the cowardly way. And it lets you off the hook from helping someone else who's in the way.
Yeah.
So you can even take that to, let's take the global out of it and say, let's look at the locals, look at St. Louis again. If I live in West County, why should I care what happens in Hyde Park? Or if I live in St. Charles County, why do I care what happens in St. Louis, County? We have these really funky, weird, artificial barriers that we create for ourselves to, I think, let ourselves off the hook. So it's not my problem. But when do you need to realize that it's all of our problem? We're all only as strong as our weakest, most vulnerable. And if you're not, trying to help support solutions to help those in true need, it's going to get you some way, shape, or fashion. And I hate to say it like that, but no man is an island. It's very cliche, but it is very true.
Right. And then this question kind of has a few parts, but are persons global citizens from birth? Is everyone a global citizen by default or by virtue of living in an interdependent world? Or do individuals become global citizens through life experience?
That's a very deep question. My view of global citizenship, I would say, tends towards that last piece, kind of your life experiences, because we do have very real definitions, if you will, as defined by blood or place, passports, all this of citizenship and that very political sense of the word citizenship. To be a global citizen is an active choice. So I can choose to realize that we're interconnected and I care and do things and live my life that way, or not.
Like the difference between you and my cousin.
We have a lot of right. And so I think that ultimately is the driver. However, from an economic perspective, that you're kind of born into it by virtue of that you are a person living in a certain place. Things that are happening in the world will affect you in some kind of way. So whether you want to admit it or not, or realize it or not, actively, we are global citizens because things that happen in one place come back and have a ripple effect and vice versa.
So those are kind of like the list of questions that I was supposed to ask you, but I have a couple of others that one of the reasons I really thought you'd be an interesting person to talk to about this is that one of the things that you're focusing on a lot in the Vernari School is not only creating young people that are global citizens, but connecting people, adults and students with resources. So how do you see that part of the project as fitting that global citizenship?
So I take that back to our tagline, if you will. So our tagline for Vernari is building sustainable communities one school at a time. So there's two branches, if you will: sustainable communities and school. Now the school is very finite. People understand what that is, and so we're going to do a lot of stuff there. When you come to building global citizens in the school sense, you have the academic formation, so you have the skills to be able to go out and become those scholar citizens, have that environmental stewardship and stewardship for community. But how do you do that from a community sustainability perspective? What does that really mean? To me, it kind of, you mentioned, Lori Diefenbach and her frame of sustainability really resonated with me on a very deep level. I continue to think about sustainability not just from the lens of the green space. That's obvious, right? That everybody can talk about STEM and all that. Yes, and science, yes. But it's also importance of place, interconnectedness, systems thinking. How do we really think about how things truly affect? What is that domino effect for everything? And in order to really build sustainable communities, you have to first meet people where they are, and they have to almost be made aware of that these are A, issues, and B, that they play a role. Just this morning was walking through one of our target neighborhoods, Hyde Park, and we walked past Clay Elementary. I love looking at these old Ittner buildings. So William Ittner, was this wonderful architect and built these schools.
God, they're gorgeous.
They're gorgeous. His vision was that he wanted little kiddos in St. Louis to be able to walk to this building that had this expansive yards and gardens at the back of the day, and these buildings with marble staircases and columns. So it was almost a majestic type of experience. And when you see the school today, the neighborhood around it today, and to think what happened, how far. And I was talking to the folks I was with this morning and said, I wonder how many people know history about Hyde Park. You see glimpses of, oh, wow, what kind of place this used to be. The architecture of the buildings. Those homes, huge homes. It's beautiful. It's beautiful park, and it's still a nice park. Do you know how important that neighborhood was? And you live here. If you understand the history and know what happened there, that kind of gives you a little sense of pride. When you have a sense of pride, you want to take care of something. You want to give back. You want to build back up. And so my thought is, when you take that through a community development lens, it's not coming in with this savior complex. So I'm going to help.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I don't live there, and I didn't grow up there. But, it is about how do you bring, first of all, connect with the people, connect with organizations that are there, those different resources that are there, and then convening them, bringing them together. And together, that is when we can find those common spaces and really then do the collective impact, which is another proxy for the global citizenship.
Right.
What I want to do through Funari is to take the view that it's about sustainability for yourself. That's intellectually, socially, and economically, if you're talking about the adults. And so intellectually, it's the head knowledge. How do you get the facts and figures and all that type of thing? But socially, do you know your neighbors? Are you connecting with your neighbors? How are you doing with your kiddos? Are you becoming a better self-agent so you can be a better agent for your kids? And then economically, do you have the skills to pay the bills? To be quite honest,
Right.
There's so many people in the neighborhood and others that are surrounding that are underemployed, unemployed, or not employable by traditional sense because of backgrounds. But that doesn't mean that there's no hope.
Right.
So I really see Funari as a way, as I've been talking to different people like Demetria Murphy, just I've been connecting with different people in the neighborhood like Demetria Murphy Watson at McGuest Hill or Dr. Terry Sullivan at Sun Ministries, etc. Everybody has a little piece, but we all have this similar vision of coming together. And so if Funari can come in, learning, and tapping into the neighborhood by listening to those voices as they already have they built the trust with the neighbors. So how can can we just kind of bring it all together
Mhm.
and lay on there, overlay it rather, other resources that can help build hope. And so, again, just going back to, we're about building sustainable systems. So systems again.
Mhm.
That's not just one path. So how do we, do our part in helping to find ways to not only serve the kiddos in the area, hopefully many of these kiddos as age appropriate can come to our school, please.
Right.
But that certainly is not a requirement. But how do we even, but more than that, educate families, illuminate them as to their potential, just help them discover their potential, not only from their family, but for where they live, and have a sense of pride. Because once you have that, then you start having that value system, and you start staying and coming back
Right.
and investing.
Right.
And it's not overnight, and that's the thing. This is a long play. But just because it's a long play doesn't mean that we don't do anything.
Right.
You have to start somewhere. And we have lots of starts. When you look at the neighborhood, you see small businesses that are there. You see rehab houses, new homes that are being constructed. So how do we continue to build that, and to the sense that the families that are there now are then instilling that sense of citizenship.
Right.
And to practicing that at home in their various communities, however they identify, and that halo effect should hopefully then really start creating a sustainable physical community of neighborhood, but also communities and family, like in faith communities, and all different types of communities that you can think of.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions. So, is there anybody that comes to mind who you see as a mentor or that you admire as a global citizen?
That is a really interesting question. There have been lots of different people that I guess I've met, through the context of school, some different professors. Particularly, I've had a very interesting path, being that my academic background is in international business. So I've had the unique experience of having exposure to a lot of people that are living, breathing, working in a very real, kind of tangible sense. But I would say that I don't know. I haven't really thought about that, to be honest with you, as if there's like one person that inspires me in a sense, because I get inspiration from so many people. I mean, even you.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be like somebody that you know, just
Mm-hmm.
somebody in the media or just anybody that. I'll let you think about that one. You can
I have to think about that one. I really have to think about that one.
I know I'm putting you on the spot with some of these.
And I'm just trying to think of names of people.
Right.
But so this is totally maybe tangential, but kind of illustrates that. So a lot of times when I listen to the radio, I'm listening to PRX all the time. So either NPR or PRX, in the mix of it. And I happened to listen to this morning, there was a story, and what was his name? His name is escaping me right now, but he's a Brazilian percussionist. And he has performed with the likes of Yo-Yo Ma and opera star. I mean, just all kinds of people all over the world. Just little guy from here, just a small town in Brazil. And he was kind of talking about global citizenship through music and art in a way that's it's very similar to this conversation that we're having right now. But how he put it was that, he sometimes didn't know who these people were. And, he was called in because he has this great reputation of just taking things. His favorite place to go to build his instruments is Home Depot. He's lived in New York now for 26 years.
Yeah.
And he was saying how what was so just amazing to him was that no matter where these people were coming from, or country, or cultures, or background, through this kind of base of music, they're able to just communicate and build in a way. And so that's a different kind of way of looking at it, that I think that even in maybe the mundane things or
Yeah.
just interactions of just normal people, to see how people can just, hearing your story. Mr. Rogers said every week, he said something to the effect that, he's one of my idols.
Yeah.
That it's hard to hate someone once you know their story.
Yeah.
And so this concept of this idea that once you start sharing, whether it's your music, your art, your story, your life story, how no matter where you're from, it just kind of comes
Yeah.
together. Those kind of examples, whether I listen to it on radio shows,
Right.
or just different folks around town that are doing things. Like I'll take like Anna Crosland, for example, at the International Institute.
Yeah.
So she's a person that I'm like, yes. I'm a little bit biased because I used to, that was like one of my first jobs.
Oh.
It was before Anna got there.
Yeah.
But, the work that the International Institute does, for instance, is a living, breathing example of global citizenship and why it's important. I mean, not only is it that St. Louis is a refugee replacement center in this country, and so we have this unique mosaic of people
Right.
here in St. Louis. But I was a teacher there for a while, and so to get to know people that are completely different background from me, different age, different country, different language. I mean, English is a complete barrier, but just the human spirit, that kind of stuff, that
Right.
moves me. That is what has kind of been the wind beneath my sail, and to my sails to say, you were part of something greater.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing. It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Another person locally, Worku, what's Worku's last name? It'll come to me, but he is Ethiopian. And starting a school, he started in Montreal Rise Together, and was designed to start really serving the Eritrean and Ethiopian kind of refugee population, but then expanding to really serve a lot of the immigrant families, and particularly the kiddos, because if they're coming to school placed in St. Louis Public Schools,
Right.
because of the ELL component, it was very difficult a lot of times for them. And unfortunately, we have a system where sometimes you're viewed as maybe you don't know the potential that they're smart.
Right.
Because you can't communicate in
Right.
English, so you automatically assume that, oh, you must be behind. And so that kind of frustration and all that type of thing just leads to a lot. I mean, you're an educator, you've been there, you understand what I'm talking
Oh,
about.
sure.
But what he has done is say, okay, we need to start doing some kind of program after school. And it started with after school type of programs. And it's grown to the point that they're almost at the point of having whole school
Nice.
to bring families from all over together. So
Yeah.
those kind of things,
Yeah.
they're like everyday hero type people,
Right.
or what I kind of like.
Right. Right.
That's inspirational.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, can you think of an issue having to do with the environment that you think a global citizen should be concerned about?
There's so many. One thing I would just say, litter and trash, it how it affects our water. Whatever you're throwing out, guess what? In some kind of way, it's going to get back to the water, and all of that, cycles. When I give my daughter baths, and she's just one, but I say bye-bye to the water, and every day I'll say the water's going somewhere. I say, the water's going back to the river, or the water's going back to the forest, or the water's going back to the ocean, different things like that. And she's probably like, what is she talking about? But when I drive, particularly through urban neighborhoods or along the highway, nothing burns me up more when I see somebody just throw stuff out. Because those, whatever it is, it's just something that's so preventable. And, when you're talking about trash, well, hopefully it's biodegradable things.
Right.
So maybe that can break down.
Doubtful.
But when you're talking about,
Right.
I'm throwing paint out, or I'm throwing, this, can of something, whatever it is, or these, CRT,
What?
monitor,
Right.
things
Right.
like that. And how that affects.
Well, it's so
something that
interesting
we
that you should bring that up because, like, that's an issue that you and I have not even talked about.
Mhm.
But I did a whole thing with my class when I was at Booter where I pulled up our school on the Google Maps, and then I zoomed in on, like, the storm drain closest to our school and talked about, like, anything from, fertilizer runoff to people throwing out their trash. And then we, like, traced that to the River de Pere. Then we traced the River de Pere to the Mississippi and, on down the line. And actually, this is one of the things that we had to do a project for in this class, and that's why I'm asking you. And my project was about the trash islands in the ocean
Yes.
that are a direct result
Yes.
of exactly
Yes.
what you're talking about. Because if it ends up in the Mississippi, then it ends up in the Gulf, then it ends up in the ocean.
Right.
And so,
And I think about, when you say that, I was just so, like, gut-wrenching when I was watching the latest oil spill was a few years ago in the Gulf.
yeah,
And how, whatever they put in, the chemical, whatever they did to put in the water, so it looks like it's all gone, but it would make the oil kind of
right,
look together.
right.
And I just thought, what in the heck is that?
Yeah,
And how is that going to now
Right.
affect everything, and then, the Gulf shrimp or whatever, the whole circle of
Mhm.
life. That's the thing that, kind of going back to your earlier question about global citizenship, are you born into it as a choice? Part of environment, the things that we do are choices that we make, but guess what? All that stuff is going to affect
Mhm.
that happens. I know there's a debate now, like particularly with the Paris meetings going on right now on climate change, and there's such very strong contingent that wants to say that, well, it's inevitable, nothing that you do can affect it. Kind of think that we've caused, the erosion of the ozone, soil erosion, cutting down the trees, invasive species, how that has changed, what has happened. I even look at my own yard, and it's like every year there's a new ecosystem.
Right.
And I'm like, what has happened around us that has changed, what has, grown, what animals are around, and all this kind of thing. So, I know it's a long way of answering the question, but I think that something like looking at water and tracing the trash.
Right.
Project. Water is something that we take for granted, and that we take for granted that we'll always have enough, and that it's always clean, and that is something that, let's say in India, for instance,
Right.
it's absolutely not
Right.
the case. Or in other countries, absolutely not.
It's just so interesting to me that you bring that up, because I'm actually, like, my big research project that I'm working on is on water. And exactly what you said, like, that we take it for granted. So,
Yeah, and so we waste it.
Mhm.
We don't think about, the pollutants, or it's kind of like the whole, when you watch the what do they call the pharmaceutical commercials, and say, take blah 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 side effects include blah, blah, blah.
I know.
I kind of see that as what we do to kind of clean up
Yeah.
the environment. It's never about, stop littering. It's not
Right.
about getting to the heart. It's like, oh, you can use this chemical to help this chemical and this. And I'm like, what?
Right.
The-
Well, like the difference between recycling and using less packaging in the first place. That,
Right, because everybody's like, recycle, but if you think about the R's of reuse,
Yeah.
reduce, and recycle, recycle's the last.
Right,
of the
reduce
three.
and reuse, right.
Reduce.
So,
Because it takes energy,
yeah.
and you're polluting sometimes, depending on what you're doing.
Right.
Recycle.
So is there an issue that comes to your mind about the economy that you think a global citizen should be concerned with?
Oh my goodness gracious. One thing, there's so many things in the economy, but I guess the intersection of education and manufacturing. Manufacturing is the fuel of economies. It's what takes you from being third world to first class, and keeps you, on that innovative scale. When you do not have an educated workforce that can continue to progress as the technology progresses, even if it's something as foundational as manufacturing, you have a problem. That is what we're experiencing in this country. We have become a service economy. And we have a whole generation of folks that are underemployed because they can no longer go find the jobs. Even the basic, if you think factory jobs, are so driven by technology that if you do not know how to use these computers, you cannot get that factory job. It's very different from, let's say, in the 50s,
Right.
60s, even 70s, even though you had some energy crisis kind of around that time. So we really need to be very real about retraining. When everything hit the fan in 2008, I think one of the lines of conversation was about how do you retrain the workforce so that folks can get back to work and all this type of thing, because we have the technologies. I don't see that happening. Not on a massive scale.
Right.
There's no access to that. So, and you can't wait until, and think that, oh, we do this program here, because by the time you get the program, the technology has changed.
Right, right.
So this is why another reason that kind of fueled my thought on how I'm designing Bernardi.
Right.
Kiddos today are going to be working 20 years from now.
Right.
15 and 20 years from now. And we know that STEM is going to be the driver. Now, exactly what that looks like may change by that time, but the foundational skills that they need, inquiry, research, measurement, all these types of things, they need to be able to do that.
Right. They need the science process skills.
Right, process skills in order to have jobs to be
Right. It's like the process over the content.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is about supplying that. So employment level is a huge piece, and that is so inextricably tied to education. So we got to fix our schools. Our schools no longer have the luxury of a liberal arts education.
Yep. Okay, I have two more. What do you see, and I guess what you just said actually kind of ties in, but is there like a social justice or an equity issue that you see as something that should be really important to a global citizen?
Yes, equality for women and girls. There are more women and girls, and yet in this country, which is one of the most advanced, there still is a pay differential. There is, in some places, even here, legal differentials.
Yeah.
And that's exacerbated in very bad ways all around the world. If you look in other countries, until we protect, honor, and have women and girls on an equal playing field with boys and men, it's going to continue to be very bad.
Yeah.
Very, very bad. Very, very difficult. When right now we have a lot of rhetoric going on, like Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and all this kind of thing. Women matter, girls matter. And if we don't pay attention to them, if they don't have the voice, if they don't have the protection, they don't have the access, this is just bad.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Yeah, right.
And I just want, even though just trying to instill in her that you're good enough, you're smart enough, you have so much to offer, and go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's looking, Mama.
Right.
But yeah. That's
Yeah.
social justice.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, so the two kind of themes that I've been doing different research on, one of them is water, and we kind of already touched on that. Another one is like food issues, and like most specifically, you hear so much about like food deserts,
Yes.
but the thing that I see is that even when they introduce healthy food resources into some areas that have been considered to be food deserts, to me it's more about like educating people, and that came out wrong because I don't want to come in and tell you what you should eat, or I don't mean you, but
No, I know
but
exactly.
how to change just the whole mindset about like healthy eating, and how to if you put, let's say, Fields Foods that came into downtown, when I go there, the people that I see are like the hipsters that live in that area. They're not the neighborhood people who necessarily that was intended for. And the urban agriculture project that I did with the teens at the Science Center, now that was a project where I did see some little, inklings of change in the way my teens thought about food, because I was able to give them direct experience with trying different things, growing things. So I guess my kind of twofold question is, how do you see that as being part of Inari's mission? And then how do you see that, like, in general? Like, do you think the food desert issue is the problem, or more like just like wide scale more nutrition education?
I think it's all of it, right? So I'll take it from the Venari perspective, then the general. So from the Venari perspective, the beauty of having a school is that you can design and do whatever you want. So you can have, really, what are your motives? What is it that you're trying to form? I mean, education is formation, right? Discipline, all this type of thing. By exposing, kiddos to different foods, whether you're growing it, to know where food comes from.
Right.
Does it come from the frozen section or McDonald's?
Or the corner store,
Understanding what the implication is of, what we put in your body and how as it relates to health, as you see personally, as you see your family, and all this type of thing. Those are things that, getting kids young to experience that, whether they're doing like, the urban farming, or they're doing like the seed to table type, cooking, making stuff. I remember you told me about this project that you had with kiddos, and they had to make a recipe, write a recipe, and they made it and taste. And those types of experiences where you are living with the food, experiencing the food, that's a way to make it accessible to people. So through school, we could totally put in all these types of exposures, so it becomes normal for those kids. So being very intentional on what we're feeding for lunch, breakfast, snacks, what are some other, experiences that we have. We can totally do that as well. Now in the bigger, community space, there's a lot more factors at play. Part of it is, the same type of exposure, because you're going to basically do what you know. And so if, grandma used lard, and mama used lard, I'm going to use lard, right? But it's also about economic factors, because I think about foods or Whole Foods. These are the hallmark organic, healthy kind of choices. But the price points of these things, is it really accessible to the people that are there? So then you have, companies like Save a Lot that, or SureSafe, that they have the Save a Lot stores in the lower income areas. For Aldi's, and I've seen, particularly with Aldi's, the transformation in what's offered to have the right price points and to really expand. But again, you have to have that bridge, and I might see it, but if I don't know how to use it, I might not do anything. So I think that there's no one solution to kind of bridge. You need to have the access, meaning physical proximity, price point accessibility, but also there needs to be some sort of way to bridge and de-incentivize the poor quality stuff. So, for example, yesterday we were watching this TV and commercials, fast food chain, and they were advertising 10 nuggets, and it just said nuggets. It didn't say chicken nugget. So we're like, nuggets are what? So that's 10 nuggets for $1.49. So that's 14.9 cents, 15 cents a nugget of whatever. What is the nutritional value of something like that? So this is getting to a bigger issue. So if you've seen documentaries like Food Inc., King Corn, those that you really see the big business behind our food industry and how that has contributed to food deserts. This lack of accessibility, lack of familiarity because we don't longer have all of the family farms everywhere.
Right.
You saw something growing and that was on her plate. You know, all of that is different now. So it's a big issue, it's a big question. How do we start bridging those gaps? I think there's a lot of value in the urban farming type of programs and organizations like Gateway Greening or you know, other the Sweet Potato Project. I mean, different things
Right.
like that. That yes, it's small impact, but it's going to take those smaller
Right.
impacts that are bridging the familiarity gap and the accessibility gap, and then you have to have the economics of those families. They need to have enough employment so they can afford
Right.
to then, you know, make those choices, because very seriously, very literally, some of these families don't have the luxury of that choice. And I hate to say that, but it is cheaper to go to the dollar menu
Oh, yeah.
than to go to the grocery store.
I mean, you've heard me talk about Shalika and Maurice. Shalika works at Schnucks,
Mhm.
so she's got anything she could want, you know, at her fingertips. And the standard dinners that she and Maurice eat are ramen noodles, pizza rolls, or frozen White Castle. And, you know, I try to, you know, get her to branch out of that, but it's quick, it's easy, she's tired, she's a single mom, and at least, like, when Maurice is with me, you know, I've got him eating anything from almonds to hummus to, he'll have a few just, you know, chances to experience different things that maybe, hopefully, I'll get a chance to let some of those sink in, but she has no interest, and she's just like, I want that nasty stuff that you eat, you know?
So it's hard. It's a hard question, right?
Mhm.
Because you know that even taste of things. I had an experience, the weirdest experience. I was at a bridal shower,
Mhm.
and there was a woman there who was the kind of organizer. She was in her 50s, I guess, and she doesn't like water.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
like, how is that possible?
I've met people who say they don't like water.
And it was because she didn't drink water. She had juice or
Right.
Kool-Aid or soda all the time. And she has health problems. She was overweight, but she doesn't want to drink bottled water. She's like, oh, I can't. This is disgusting. And it's just like, so, you know, how do you fix that?
Right. Well, that's like another thing I try to explain to Shalika. Like Capri Sun is not juice. You know, Kool-Aid jammers are not like Maurice will say, can I get some juice? High C is not juice. It's, you know, it's sugar water.
So, you know, it's, again, and really and truly, your taste buds, you know, acclimate to those types of things to the point that some of the healthy things don't taste
Right.
good to you.
Right.
Your body will, you know, if you are on a sugar
Right.
diet, if you stop having it, you have physical health symptoms. So it's a huge thing. And so it's not, again, it goes back to the global solution.
Right.
It's not just having a store. It's a lot of stuff that has to
Yeah.
happen too. So.
Right. All right. Well, I think those are all of my questions. Is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't covered?
I think we covered a lot.
I know.
I hope
Thank
I
you.
answered
You
your
did. No, thank you so much for being. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. But